Hello people of the internet, this is KaijuNoir here with another episode of Kaiju's Corner, the show that I use to talk about anything that I feel like is worth discussing. And rather than having Deadpoolzilla, my usual co-host, with me, here I have an actual, probably like the first guest for this show. So I'd like to welcome you to a friend of mine that I met. I had the opportunity to meet at this year's G-Fest, and he goes by the name of Denny Roth. You may know him on DeviantArt as, what is it that you actually go by, Denny?
I go by DR Studios.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also known on YouTube with my limited channel as Draco Raylin, and it's also my gamer tag on a lot of stuff. But yeah, I am the owner operator of DR Studios. I'm also the head artist of Martial Star. Only artist, I should say. Sorry. It is late and I am tired, and I've been drinking just a wee bit.
It's alright, there's no need for any sort of professional demeanor here.
Oh, right, because we're talking about kaiju. You don't need professionalism when you talk about kaiju.
Yeah, you know, we're just a couple of dudes just shooting the shit on the internets.
Hello, internet people.
So, yeah, like I mentioned before, he and we met at G-Fest through Christopher Martinez, the artist behind the Fire Beast series. And, you know, he and Denny and we just, quickly instantly connected, I would say. Especially through our, hour-long conversation on the Gundam franchise. And so, after G-Fest, he and I started talking on Skype, and I realized that, you know, both of us had been rather jaded, I want to say. Perhaps that's not the right word, but we were rather disappointed with the outcome that the development towards the Kickstarter video game Colossal Kaiju Combat turned out. And so I ended up learning a lot of interesting information from Denny on the history of that game's development. Now, for those of you who don't know, or for those of you who probably forgot, like many of you, Colossal Kaiju Combat was this game that was being crowdfunded on Kickstarter way back in, I want to say 2012, and the project was headed by both Simon Strange, who was a developer on the last three Pipeworks Godzilla games for the GameCube, PS2, Xbox, and Wii, as well as Matt Frank, this was right around the time where he just started working on the IDW comics, at that point only being an alternate cover guy, before eventually growing even more popular and eventually getting the chance to do interiors on Godzilla Rulers of Earth. And as the years went by, even though the game was successfully funded, years went by, the information started getting smaller, the amount of information getting put out by Simon was getting smaller and smaller, and eventually the game just kind of withered away, and just people kind of stopped talking about it. People kind of forgot about it, and it's been 4 years and we still don't have a game. I mean, heck, Mighty Number 9 took 3 years and over 100 delays, and that game eventually came out. But yeah, still no sign of Kaiju Combat. So I feel like it's rather appropriate that for Denny and I to just give our thoughts on Kaiju Combat, as well as talk about discussing certain things and letting you, the viewer, know, who have probably maybe been wondering what happened to Kaiju Combat, exactly what happened to it. Kind of almost in a way, sort of Denny, do you remember that documentary that came out recently on the death of Superman Lives? What happened?
I don't think I saw that one specifically, but I think I know the direction we're going with this.
I think so, yeah. It's the failure of Kaiju Combat. What is the true story?
The inner story, the inner workings, the dark underground, the shady dealings.
Indeed. So, to start this all off, I'll let you take over the reins, Denny. But first off, what was your personal role in Kaiju Combat, and how did you come to know about this project?
Okay, so a bit of background information on Kaiju Combat. We already went over Simon Strange. He worked for Pipeworks, Atari for the first 3 Godzilla games. His role in those games, as I am aware, is not so much a lot in the development aspect until we start getting closer to Save the Earth and eventually Unleashed. You start getting more of a control over the system, which is why when you get Save the Earth, we have such really weird gameplay mechanics, especially in some of the mini games. A lot of that transferred over into Unleashed, and it was just unplayable. And again, as I recall, and I will fully disclose, it has been years since a lot of this stuff has happened, and I'll get into the point about the time I left the forums, when I left the forums and why. So a lot of the information I've had has been is distorted through a combination of time and not paying attention. But I'll try and recount as best I can what did happen and how we had it. But for those of you who don't know, Simon Strange's involvement in the Godzilla franchise has been pretty much in the game development world over the main 3 Godzilla fighting games we had. So he proposed the idea of a Colossal Kaiju, of Kaiju Combat was what it was originally called, had its first Kickstarter, I believe, in 2012.
I believe so too, yeah.
It failed. It was, I remember seeing some things for it, some advertisement for it on Facebook. I know Matt Frank was involved in it, I think at that point. But because of his popularity at the time, it wasn't known very well. Outside of the kaiju community, which is what it was like trying to get advertised towards, for continuation of the Pipeworks style kind of fighting game. So I wasn't involved really much in that Kickstarter at all. The Kaiju Combat second Kickstarter was where I actually got involved in. My role in that was I backed the Kickstarter at both the design team member stage as well as to get every free copy of the game stage. So it was like the $150 mark here. I didn't have enough money to pledge for the $500 one, which I really want to do because I really would have liked to get a monster in the game, which I thought would have been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That was pretty much the limit of my involvement at the Kickstarter level, was just funding it, and then I got to the design team membership stuff and a bunch of those other things too.
Yeah. As for me, I think I only donated like $25, which was enough to be technically in like the design team forum and just to participate. But then other than that, it was just like $25 was like the bare minimum to get a copy of the first game itself, which was Fall of Nemesis. And it was kind of like a tie-in to the Project Nemesis novels that were that recently came out at the time.
That's correct. The big part of the funding, if I remember correctly, was Jeremy Robinson did donate quite a bit of money to it. And because of that donation, because of that sponsorship, his original kaiju character Nemesis was promoted as the primary. The big bad kaiju to fight at the end of the game, but also a playable character as well. There's a bit more to it than that, because there was also this other part of the game being developed for it was Colossal Kaiju Combat Kaiju Land Battles, which Kaiju Land Battles, I never looked much into it, but if I recall, it is a type of, it was like a flash game with these little kind of kaiju mascots, Commodion, Robo-Commodion,
a shark monster, a beaver monster.
Shark monster. And it also had like this magma monster of, I want to say Ragnarok. I don't particularly remember the name because the character, that entire thing didn't really interest me that much.
I played like a couple minutes of it years ago, and it didn't really hold my interest for long. It was just a basic Facebook game where you just like click on stuff and get more people to join the game so that you can get extra points to click on more stuff. Kind of like your Farmville, Cityville sort of deal.
Farmville, Cityville, Jurassic Park Builder, all that fun, all those fun Facebook game stuff. SimCity when it was back on there.
Yeah.
Anyways, so after the Kickstarter finished, I found out that there was a forum, so I went and joined the forums, and I ended up kind of striking up some friendships with several members on the forums. I'm still friends with them today. So in the beginning, I went, and the way that the team worked was the way the idea of the game was going to work was that we already had about a dozen or so monsters originally that made it through the first Kickstarter, but were also included for the second. So we had things like Duncan, the giant kangaroo, Macrosaurus, which their involvement in the game was exceedingly highly controversial because of their original furry status.
What? Really?
Yes, Duncan and Macrosaurus, as I recall, are both characters within the furry fandom.
Really?
Yes, because Duncan is a massive green kangaroo,
yes,
and Macrosaurus is this over chubby Tyrannosaurus that decides to eat everything. Granted, they're not portrayed as exceedingly furry in the games or in the game art we've gotten for them so far. Any of the game stills that the game is still unplayable at that point. But that was their original involvement, and that honestly set a lot of people off for a couple of reasons.
Okay, so they were already pre-established characters in another community culture thing entirely.
What happened was they got bought into the game at that $500 level, putting your monster into the game. And the original creators of those monsters were not the ones who put up, if I remember correctly, the original creators of those characters, Duncan and Macrosaurus, were not the ones that put up their monster up. Someone else did. So that's kind of what happened on that end. And then they got kind of kaiju-fied through Matt and Simon's process of their collaboration, the collaboration process. So what happened and what the game was designed to do was to have a continually evolving, growing roster of monsters, of kaiju. Where we had basically like the first 11 or first 12, including Nemesis, and then we had more and more and more start coming up here. I believe I remember when Project Nemesis first came out in 2014 was when I started looking a lot more into a lot of the stuff on the website, a lot of the wiki stuff, a lot more stuff on the forums. Because I believe I joined in late July, early August of 2014 is when I officially joined the forums.
Okay.
And when
so at that point, you were already 2 years into development.
Because the second Kickstarter, which succeeded, but not by very much. That ended, I believe, in early 2014, if not late 2013.
Because I could have sworn, I think it was like the first, from my memories, I think maybe it was like the first Kickstarter that was successful, but then it was the second Kickstarter in which they were trying to form a partnership with Ouya, I think.
No? That was the
Ouya
one was the third one. There were 3 Kickstarters.
Okay.
There was the first one for Kaiju Combat, which failed.
Right.
It did not meet its goals. The second one succeeded its goals, not by very much, but did succeed.
Yeah.
Then the third one, which happened either later that year. No, it was early 20. No, wait, all my days are off because I think it's 2012 and I think 2013, and then Godzilla 2014 because there was a whole. I was on pre-active on the forums, late 2013, early 2014. And the Ouya Kickstarter was in 2014.
Right. Yeah, because I think 2014 was like the last year for like the Ouya to have any kind of relevancy.
Right, and that fell through. The Ouya itself fell through pretty hard.
Right. They tried Ouya. Like for those who don't know, the Ouya tried to have like this what's it called? Save the Games Kickstarter, Save the Games program, where if an indie game was trying to get funded, crowdfunded on Kickstarter, Ouya would help. If like that Kickstarter game were to get successfully funded, Ouya would come in and give them the exact double the amount of money they need, at least up to $50,000, I believe, and then later they lowered it down to we'll give you as much as $10,000 if you successfully, we'll give you up to $10,000 if you successfully manage to fund your game.
Right, and so that was a big deal for us because at that point when the Ouya Kickstarter was going, Kaiju Combat was holding on hard times. But I'm getting off track. So back to how the game was, because for the developing roster of monsters to work, what it was doing is actually kind of ingenious. And it's not a bad system, but it was just implemented really kind of awkwardly. What you would have is you would propose monsters in the forums. There's a specific subforum devoted to your original monsters. So you would put down the monster, you give him a brief description, you would give him a brief power set, you would give him an idea of like what kind of damage does it do. Does it do bashing, cosmic, slashing, lacerations, energy blasts?
Yeah.
Right. And then you would go through, and what it was doing is you were working with other people on the forums who liked your monster, were giving you feedback, and you could ask and open for feedback to come back and forth for it. And then that way the people would help kind of build the monster, build it into a power set and all this other stuff. So once you had that, then you had a sponsorship round. Usually about once every 6 months, so twice a year. What that does is people would put up monsters and sponsor them. And then you would be able to vote for your monster. However, to vote, you had to pay, as I remember from the last couple of times, you had to pay about $10 per vote. If your monster got enough votes, and it made to like a top percentage, it was turned into a card for what was then the Kaiju Combat trading card game. This is where we got into some trouble with Wizards of the Coast, who decided to threaten a lawsuit against us because we were using the term Kaiju.
I remember that.
Because they were also working on their card game called KaijuNoir, which is kind of not the same thing, but I'm aware of KaijuNoir.
What
And so
didn't that also have an animated TV show that also had like some monster polar bear?
The kaiju. I've seen the Kaijuden show twice. I didn't get into it enough to actually I'll put it this way: Yu-Gi-Oh was more interesting, and Yu-Gi-Oh was terrible, but I love it still. But we got into so there was that legal verse that kind of forced Simon to make turn into Colossal Kaiju Combat and have a completely new logo design. So that's where we get Colossal Kaiju Combat, or CKC.
Right.
So once you're made into a card, then it's put up to another sponsorship vote, for inclusion into the video game. So, and at this point, it becomes a massive popularity contest among people on the forums. And then and it's usually like the top 3, or maybe top 5, I can't remember. It's usually the top, very, very top percentage of that trading card round. That if they get in there, then hey, you're up for collaboration with Simon Strange, who's developing the game, and Matt Frank, who's designing the art for the game, the official character art at the time, to get your monster designed, discuss their powers, refine their backstory so that it fits within the game world and the game mechanics. And at that point, Matt would finish up the art, and there would be a new monster, Monster Mondays is what they were called.
I remember those,
Where Matt would post it on DeviantArt and would post it on
Facebook,
and it would post it up on the design wiki for Colossal Kaiju Combat. So that's where all of that started, and that's kind of how that process ran for about 2 years. A lot of the money from the second Kickstarter went into paying Matt about, if I remember correctly, because Matt's commission prices were really high at the time. I think they're still pretty high because dude is damn good and he's damn busy. Also, a really nice guy. If you ever get a chance to talk about anything, he is so excitable about everything. That's what I love about him. His commission prices, I think it was said that it was like a couple $100 to $300 per commission that he was doing for CKC.
And these are like full-on, like fully inked, fully colored, fully
colored, full-body images. He'd do the design he'd do the preliminary design sketches based off your pictures or whatever you had designed for it.
So he's essentially like a concept artist for the game.
He was the art director for CKC. That was his official title for Sunstone.
Right. You're right.
He was the art director for Sunstone Games, which, for those of you who don't know, we kind of glossed over this. Simon Strange's company that was performing Kaiju Combat is Sunstone Games. Was what the name of the thing is.
So essentially, this is like an entirely independent, or he's trying to go like the entirely independent route, where he's trying to start his own company and start his own development team and game and all that stuff.
Right, and that's primarily what he was trying to do with that in order to get Kaiju Combat off the ground. Okay, so let's go forward a little bit here, because that was the process. You'd submit your own monster to the forums, get feedback to make it better. Take what feedback you can, because people are strange, and people have strange requests.
Not everyone's going to be.
There are some members on the forums that are not the most desirable because of the way they act. I don't know if that's a matter of age, because it turned out that as the game developed and the forums got bigger, there was a large attraction of this younger teenage crowd. To where you have more of the older generation, like myself and several others, are kind of getting bogged down in a lot of the childishness of a lot of it, and it kind of was very, very bad for that. So I'll end on that, but that's basically what the process was. It was you put a monster up for sponsorship. You put it up for sponsorship after the feedback on the forums, and you keep the thread and everything. You'd submit it for the card. If you got into the card sponsorship, then you were down to a second vote to get into the game from the card set. And we were up to it was the set 6 was the last set that I was basically the set I left on. For a couple of reasons, for several reasons. Because the card game was designed to be a source of income for the game.
Right.
It was basically, we put as little money, I think the idea was to put as little money as possible into the game, although we hired Frankie B. Washington to do a lot of the card art.
And for those who don't know, Frankie B. Washington was the artist and co-creator of the indie giant robot comic, Robot God Akamatsu.
Yes, and he's very good, very, very distinctive style.
Yeah, he does a lot of how would you say, like bold outlines?
Very
like bold inks.
Bold inks, very kind of, it reminds me of the kind of like 90s set of extreme comics with just very, very heavy ink. Not quite noir style with a lot of blacks, but very accentuated with blacks. But very good, very wonderful guy. He was hired to do a lot of the card art for the trading card game for Kaiju Combat. And there was another option that came about later where there were these Evo cards or evolution cards where you'd pick like a handful of monsters from the card set, would be voted to get an evolution form to which the original creators had no input whatsoever into what final form these evolution forms went. Simon Strange decided right then and there, when he got them commissioned, what they were to look like.
So you can decide what your monster is going to transform into.
Right. The worst example, I think, of this was Seismosaurus. Seismosaurus originally is this human boy who's transformed into this very kind of brontosaurian, upright standing, brawling dinosaur with gemstone armor.
Really
cool
like a more like armored, more like humanoid version of like Red King.
Yes.
I guess Red King kind of has a bit of that like long neck dinosaur, like upright position sort of basic concept.
But this is like if you take a sauropod, like an apatosaurus, make it upright. It reminds me more of the brontosaurus from Dinosaurs.
Oh yeah.
Or the Diplodocus. I don't remember which one it was. It's been ages. But he had like helmet armor down his back, so it's like a humanoid Plateosaurus, I guess would be a better one. So anyways, for that one, Simon took, and this is all Simon's idea because I remember correctly, the original creator of Seismosaurus had no input in this, and it made the evolution for Seismosaur this kind of alien xenomorph-looking creature. Fangs, massive, spiky armor. And I remember the creator, Seismosaurus creator, was kind of distraught over it for a while, and then he eventually started making jokes about it, and even came up with a name for the form called Strikerosaur, because a lot of the people who came up with these monsters, these are all OCs. They're original characters, and I use air quotes with that, because these are, original characters. Some of them, not all of them, some of them try and shoehorn into existing, kaiju universes as another introduction into the series. Again, not all of them. Several of them are their own thing, and their own creation, which I have I have a bit more respect for. We can talk about that in a later podcast. I have a rant about that, but that's an example of Simon Strange taking creative control away from the creators of these monsters, because when you got into the card set, you basically sign away a lot of the exclusive rights to the monster.
Right. You mentioned to me before in our original conversation about this, about like the how like flawed the contract was. The
contract was worded exceedingly vague. Exceedingly vague to the point where I had to bring this up to Simon when one of my monsters got in. Which is another discussion about how vague it is about how the monster can be used by Sunstone Inc. You basically sign over the concept of your monster to Sunstone for them to do anything to that they wanted, including redesigning it, without any real input from the original creation holder. So that in and of itself was such a horrible thing to do, I think, to some of these people who wanted to take their creations a bit further, like they wanted to do stories with them. They wanted to see about getting them in some other indie games, because some of my friends who were on there and had the monsters there had these stories revolved around them, had their own little interesting things. It basically takes away a lot of any kind of profit making you can make off your creation.
Right. So it's like essentially by signing over your monster to Kaiju Combat, you're letting Kaiju Combat have control over like an entire media format, an entire area of entertainment, which in this case being video games, completely locked off. You can't do anything else video game related with that monster. Exactly.
The specific relation to that was Sunstone Games owns the exclusive video game rights to your monster. Exclusively.
Right.
To the point where if you want to have any other kind of indie developer do anything, which there are some indie developers that Sunstone worked with, like Chroma Squad, because we had Grimgrawl, the polar bear, the ice polar bear, as well as one of the really, I won't say Mugen, but it's not his name. It wasn't Mugen. Mulligan. His name was Mulligan. It was the weird ass golf ball, golf kaiju, which looked more like a Power Rangers villain.
Yeah.
Which I have no problem with because I actually like that design. That is freaking amazing. I love that.
Right.
But yeah. So Sunstone had the right to sell to kind of to either own your creation for specific video game purposes, or give the rights off to someone else. This got more exceedingly complicated when the concept of the Colossal Kaiju comic was brought into play. It got exceedingly more complex because they had to add another line, another article into the contract about how the character, that Sunstone owned the rights to do whatever basically they want to do with the character in the comic. So basically, you could take Seismosaur, for example,
right,
and in the comic, cut off his arm, replace it with a cybernetic enhancement, and making basically the kaiju version of Cable. And the creator would have no say about how that character is handled. It was all up to Sunstone's creative development team, which that in itself is another completely different argument in itself. But what it did, and what Kaiju Combat was, the forum specifically, is that we were free research and development for developing a video game from people who had no video game experience.
That is true. I mean, it kind of sounds decent on, like a good idea on paper. It's just like, hey, let's have an entire forum and let's have everybody give their input on what they think makes a great giant monster fighting game, and then getting all those suggestions and making a game eventually.
I will add the caveat that only the design team members who had paid for that specific right had any real say in what went into the game. But even then, the DTM members really often kind of got outvoted or superseded by Simon Strange's specific design choices.
So I guess in a way, our input didn't really matter?
It seemed like it. It seemed like anything we tried to make an argument for, and there was a lot of other problems with how the forums were run, was anything that we were trying to do to help make the game a good experience. We really didn't have much of a direction to go, because I don't remember Simon actually posting, okay, we want to talk, okay, this thread is specifically for talking about this set of the rules and functions and for balancing issues. What do you guys think we should do with this? Here's the current situation. How do you think we should help resolve this? Although on that side, again, you have people who have very little video game experience, myself, trying to work out the standards for a video game that we don't even have a demo of yet. Not to mention some other aspects of the game that got overruled after the demo, after the beta came out. That in itself was another complete wasn't a disappointment at first, but there were a lot of loading issues, a lot of stuff, but we can go on to that here a little bit later here, but I have some actual feedback from how the game worked in practical use. So let's see, what else are we going over? So again, that was the process. To summarize everything we've done here, you put in a monster into the forums as a monster for submission. You get it sponsored, you get it voted into the card set. The card set itself is then voted on a second time, or a first time, to see which monster gets into the game. Then it's voted on a second time for a special evolution card for the card game that no one really played but was expected to push forward the franchise and basically be another source of income for the franchise.
Yeah, it's like I'm not too involved in the in a lot of the giant monster fan base when it comes to like my involvement with them on the internet, but it's like I did not really knew anyone who was really like I didn't really knew anyone who was talking about the game or played the card game or collected the cards in the first place. I didn't really knew any. I don't think the card game never really caught on, I think.
The card game barely caught on with people on the forums. I mean,
Uh-huh.
I've got about 2 dozen cards because people sent me copies. I got them from other friends who
Yeah.
bought the cards.
And I only have like one card, which is actually I got from Chris, which I actually got from Chris of Tyler's monster Durantis.
I think I remember Durantis in there. I think.
Yeah, he was kind of like that, kind of like a long neck Spinosaurus aquatic monster.
Yeah, I do remember that a little bit. But that's kind of how the process was supposed to work.
Mm-hmm.
And for a while it was, because we had over 70 individual kaiju. A lot of them very interesting. Some of them flat out freaking ridiculous. And I'm not talking about Mulligan. Mulligan was hilarious. I love Mulligan. I would play Mulligan because he's so freaking hilarious. But we had a haunted house.
I remember that. Yeah.
We had a haunted house, which kind of sounds cool, but I don't think it fits very well for what they were trying to do.
You got your yokai fan base right there for the haunted house.
It's not even yokai. It wasn't even yokai. It was like all West. I think it was like originally Western monsters. I don't think yokai were mentioned in that at all. I mean, I think it was based mostly on that old story of the haunted house.
Or maybe they were inspired by not Steven Spielberg, but I guess he produced that one movie, Monster House. That was the literal title of the movie, if you remember that.
I don't think it was based on. I don't know if it was based on Monster House, but I think it may have been based more on. I know there's a story out there about, but this was on the real Ghostbusters of this house on Haunted Hill kind of thing, where if you stayed at the house for a full night, you win like a bunch of money, but the entire house is haunted and trying to kill you.
Yeah.
I remember that. I remember that Ghostbusters episode, but I've also seen that parodied, if not ripped off, in other media. So I know it's got to be a more common, like a
concept.
Yeah, public domain story. I just don't know where it came from originally. But yeah. So let's see. Yeah, that's how the process worked, and we came with some really interesting monsters. We had some horrible monsters, and there have been rumors of some very horrible collaborations due to Simon's input on how something was to be done. There was some drama over the model designs specifically. There was drama over the animation. It started getting really, really worse. If I recall, middle of 2014, if not late 2014, if I remember correctly. I'm trying to remember exactly when I left.
Yeah, because at this point,
it has been a couple years.
I will say that at this point, I was just like, I made like I knew I started a forum post about talking about like targeting, because I know one of my biggest issues with Godzilla Save the Earth, and especially with Unleashed, was about when it came to targeting. How do you fight a monster you specifically want, rather than the auto targeting system that the later two games had. But after that, I kind of like backed away from the involvement in the process. I did do my vote. I forgot what I voted on during like the first two voting. What would they call them?
The sponsorships.
The sponsorship, yeah. The first two rounds of sponsorship votings. But after that, I kind of backed away from the development, because I knew that at that point, I knew that me personally, I did not have a lot of experience with video games, so I decided to just leave it to people who would probably have a better input than me. So at that point, I kind of backed away from the activity of the forums, and simply kept track of Kaiju Combat's development through the Facebook page, as well as any emails that they would send from to the Kickstarter backers.
Right, and that's kind of how it went for the most part here. But as it grew, and I remember meeting a bunch of people from the forums on my first G-Fest. There was a lot of people hanging out, but at that point, myself and several others had either left, or our involvement in the forum specifically had been reduced to. I was using it as advertising, because I used to run on there a sketch thread where I'd put up an offer to do a whole bunch of like just kaiju sketches. I'd sketch your monster, no problem. Sketch your monster, no problem. And I was often getting about 10 requests in a day.
Cool.
They're free sketches, though. They're very sketches. They're very loose. I put them all up on my DeviantArt under Colossal Kaiju Combat sketches. I usually spend about 15, 30 minutes on each of them. Some of them a little bit more if they're a little bit complicated design, but I try and do dynamic. And I did it for a couple reasons, because I did it mostly because I wanted practice in drawing outside of my comfort zones, which a lot of mechanical monsters that came up. Some really very unorthodox ones, some very, very asymmetrical ones. So it was all a challenge. I gotta play with poses, I gotta play with creature design, I gotta play with a bunch of stuff.
Sound like a lot of good practice.
I did over 130 sketches for that entire form before I shut it down. Because it got to the point where people were starting to demand I color them and finish them. And I told them no, and they didn't like that answer. There was a whole lot of disrespect, not just towards me, but to other artists who were bombarded by requests that were not given a whole range of respect for the fact that doing art takes time. I saw one of the best artists I've seen, who was 10 years younger than I was, so much more better than I was getting hassled consistently by several members of the forums as to why they didn't have their art done. And they had requested it like the day before.
What?
Right.
And
so again,
also, are any of them charging for commissions? Or are these straight up? Were most of these artists doing it
there were commission threads up. There were commission threads up, and some of them were being paid for commission. Some of them were doing commission stuff. But this artist, this very young artist, who I have the most amount of respect for, the kid's going to go really far in the art world as far as concept design and everything else. I hope to see his work up there someday in the future. All the respect, all the best wishes for him. Really great kid. Was getting hassled because it takes him a while to do some of this stuff, and I understood that because he's trying to get better. He was doing the same thing I was. He was taking orders and commissions, and sometimes he was taking requests for the explicit reason of trying to improve himself, for trying to make himself better by drawing outside of his comfort zone for things that he's not good at. Again, really great kid, hassled to death, and it wasn't just him, it was other artists on the forums just getting hassled by these kids. And I say that in that at this point, the Kaiju Combat forums are getting a lot more of this preteen to teenager or mid-teen, I won't say collective, but new accounts of these younger kids. And I met some of these kids at G-Fest, and these are kids who are in their early teens. I'm talking like
12, 13, 14.
12, 13 years old.
Wow.
And they're in there, and they're all excited for it, and they're all gung-ho for it, and they're not listening to reason whatsoever.
It's like, art takes time.
Art takes time, and I'm not going to color anything unless you want to pay for it. And then
the fact that you're doing this for free, it's like, I'd be grateful for the fact that you're doing it for free. I would have no complaints whatsoever.
That was over $1,300 worth of work I should have gotten paid for. But I didn't charge for selfish reasons, and that's my own fault. So it got to the point where I closed down the request thread, but I was still getting people, I had some people private message me asking me, are they free yet? And I told them, well, I'm not doing the sketch requests, but the sketches were free, but still charging for color, and I had this big, long back and forth between someone. Admittedly, the person was fairly young, but didn't quite grasp the concept of color. They kept saying that color wasn't free. Color is free. Color doesn't cost anything to color. I'm sitting here going, do you? And this kid, the person was pretty young. We could tell. We already knew that they were pretty young. So we broke it down to them within 2 pages of just the disrespect they were sending me. But I also understand, you're a kid. You're not understanding what you're saying so far. You don't understand how long the process takes. So I broke it down for them in a very simple term, saying, okay, look, the materials that you purchase to do the coloring costs money. The fact that I do this all digitally costs money to run the internet, to run my computer, all the electricity. The software costs money, so does the tablet I use. So it's all of this stuff. All the supplies I use to make this art for you guys costs money. It costs time because I'm getting paid for the work that I'm doing. And then they private messaged me, about a month later saying, are they free yet? I'm like, dude, no. No, they're not.
Like talking to a brick wall.
Yes, and I think that's part of the mentality you were getting with some of the newer generation. And there were some of these newer members that were just completely disruptive and disrespectful that we all hated this. The other problem with the forum is that there's basically no
Moderation?
There is none whatsoever. Simon Strange refused to moderate the forums. Flat out refused it. In the shout box, or is that main chat where we had people who were on there just disrupting things. He finally got to the point where he allowed moderators, specifically for the shout box, to actually ban people from the shout box, but could not ban anyone from saying stuff on the forums. He did not believe in banning people because he didn't believe that he kind of believed this really weird new age philosophy of, the spare the rod, spoil the child. But on an internet forum, it doesn't work like that.
Right, because it's like everyone's anonymous, and so they're more inclined to get away with anything, especially if they don't even get a slap on the wrist, if that. Right.
So Simon flat out admitted, and we flat out argued with him. Several of the prominent older members, even some of the newer members, were getting annoyed by.
Yeah, because again, it's treatment. The internet. Like, if you're on the internet, like, the fact that there are horrible people on the internet is like a guarantee, like a given.
Right. In this case, we tried explaining to him, look, you have to ban these people. They are disruptive to what you are using as the face of the game. And he flat out refuses to ban anyone. And I think he still does to this day because he doesn't believe in negative consequences for negative actions. Weird shit like that. So in that instance, that was another reason that caused a lot of people to leave is because and that plus the final release of the beta for Kaiju Combat.
No, it was the alpha.
Yeah, it's the alpha.
They called it an alpha.
It was an alpha. It was pre-alpha alpha. It was pre-alphabet alpha.
It was like Greek Roman letters before an alphabet was ever made.
No, this is pre-Roman letters. We're talking like
Latin.
We're talking Latin here.
Yeah.
So here's what it is. For those of you who don't know, Kaiju Combat is actually on Steam still, I believe, but it's listed as it's listed Colossal Kaiju Combat should be Kaiju Land Battles.
Right.
As part of the second Kickstarter's funding for the arrangement that Sunstone Games made with the contributors for this amount was to produce the characters from Kaiju Land Battles as playable characters in kind of their own little spin-off game using mechanics and using the game engine of Kaiju Combat, which the game engine was built to be very similar to the original the three Godzilla games that came out. Melee, Save the Earth, and then Unleashed. So that got released, and that was buggy as hell.
I do say, like, I remember I did voted. They announced, like, they had 6 characters, and they were going to narrow it down to 4, and I remember participating in the voting for that, and eventually we got, like, the 4 of those monsters from Kaiju Land Battle, and I guess, like, the plan was to have this alpha for what would eventually be the free version of Kaiju Combat. So Kaiju Land Battles would have been the free version with only 4 monsters from a Facebook game. Then from there on, they were going to work on the actual version that would have cost, like, theoretically, like $20, $25, and that would have been the one with at least, like, 8 monsters, I think, with 2 bosses. 12, okay, thank you. 12 monsters with 2 bosses, one of which being Nemesis.
Right. So that was primarily how that went, and the release of that game started an entire different shitstorm because not everyone knows how a fighting game is supposed to work. Because a fighting game plays differently than an RPG or an action adventure or a first-person shooter or any of this stuff. Part of the problem with part of what happened was the game got released. It was very bad. Multiplayer was very bad. You couldn't have more than 2 people in an arena, I think. I don't remember. Right. And one of the other things was that people apparently who played fighting games, like some of my very good friends I made from Kaiju Combat, they know how to play fighting games and they know how to block. So, several months after the beta came out, the forums had a bit of a backlash, and someone complained to Simon enough that they completely removed blocking as a mechanic from the game. Completely. No character could block. So the thing with Kaiju Land Battles is it was the beta. It was also the bug tester. It was basically we were doing all the research and development and game testing for free.
Right.
of what normally we should all be getting paid buco bucks for doing for some of the, for some stuff that we put into.
By the way, I did want to ask, what kind of development team did Simon actually had during the development of this beta?
Oh my god, who was that?
Because he never advertised the fact that he had a game development. It was just him and Matt from the beginning.
He had a few people. Now what happened here is, I know that he originally approached a pair of game designers. I know who they are. I'm friends with them. I'm not going to name them out loud here.
Mm-hmm.
Who did work on some of the early models for Ragnarok,
Mm-hmm.
and Mecha Commodion. And they still have some of those models and some of those assets from the time they developed on the game. However, they were too expensive. That's too expensive with air quotes there for Simon to work with consistently. So he went to another individual who got paid for doing the work before doing the work and ran off with the money. So then Simon had to go to a third set of game developers for the assets.
Yeah.
We only really had the one arena. Even though the screen caps show like a city, very barren, crappy city. We had the space arena.
Mm-hmm.
Fun fact: I offered to help with arena design.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually did some. I kicked myself I kicked myself for doing this. I did some asset and some arena design for Simon Strange for one of the arenas that he wanted to have for the game, which was this kind of deserted, isolated alien city.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did some of that, and I thought of, like, okay, how can we make this kind of cool? I know it's probably going to be just background fluff, but how are we going to make this cool? Have a little cliff in the background, have some of the stuff like fall down, like the rocks fall down, make it a hazard as part of the arena, kind of cool stuff like that.
Right.
I never heard back from him on that. Send it to him. He's got it. I don't know what's going to happen with it. Probably
I guess as far as we know, it was never added. We just have that one game with, I guess, like that little monster.
I don't think it's been animated. I mean, all the particle effects are crap.
So you made like an actual like 3D modeled stage?
I don't do 3D modeling. I did the concept art for it. I did the concept art for one.
Okay. So you designed it basically, yeah.
Yeah, I did some concept design for some alien style buildings, deserted arena.
Yeah.
I put in one of the established monsters that had already been done into the picture as a size reference.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of, there's very little. So Simon's gone through like 3 development teams at this point. Before we get Kaiju Land battles. And the funny thing is that they're so poorly animated that some of the earlier animators went back with little movie files of the monster assets they still had to show off what Simon could do if he had money. It was kind of a tongue-in-cheek back at Simon for firing them for being too expensive by saying, if you pay us what we're worth, this is what is capable, and it turned into a shitstorm on the shoutbox. It was funny as hell in that aspect.
So really, like, Simon doesn't really have a real development team, right? He's kind of just mostly doing this himself. I think he's doing it by himself, because I think he has some of it, but he's also going through a lot of freelancers to do this. I think so. It's never like It's never a concrete crew. It's just like he's just going on getting these guys like on rotation.
Right. He's going through freelancers as fast as he can to get stuff done. So we were supposed to have this by G-Fest 2014. We were supposed to have the alpha. We were supposed to have the alpha done by 2014. We didn't get it till like August for G-Fest, like the 2014 G-Fest. We didn't get it till like August, September. We were supposed to get a better up-to-date version 2015 with more of the monsters from the actual Fall of Nemesis game. That was buggy as shit in the game. Because I went and I played it because I wanted to try some of the monsters as what we had, but like the tail animations were wrong and awkward, especially for Dragon Lotus. Her tail didn't move at all. Nemesis wasn't playable. Lycanoid could only jump.
Like jump, not move?
No, well, he could move, but he just all his animation could do was just jump.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember if Duncan could do anything. I don't remember if Macrosaur was there at all.
Mm-hmm. That's funny, because Macrosaur was like one of the first monsters announced for the game.
Yes, and his model was done, but like none of the animations were done. None of the hitbox stuff was done.
And that's also funny, ironic, because Macrosaurus's like 3D model was the first one that was ever like revealed to the public.
Yeah. I think Duncan was done, but he didn't have any attacks programmed. So all he could really do was move. And when he attacked, he didn't move at all, I don't think. So yeah, it was still very, very raw. And the game crashed constantly. Especially when you're trying to play it with multiple people. It just was not a good time.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it was my laptop, but I also remember like versions of the alpha/beta would often like the frame rate would just keep like going out of control. I'm not sure if what was the frame rate like for you?
I think the frame rate was set at about was running pretty much at about 30 to 60. I wasn't experiencing too much problems with it.
Oh, okay.
Honestly, I didn't experience much problem with it because I played it for a very, very short amount of time.
Okay.
But yeah, we were expected to go through and debug everything. We were expected to find all the bugs and all the problems, and several people were going through. It's like, do these kids know how to actually search for a bug and find it? The answer is no. No, they did not. So that went on, and it was about then, about 2015. So if I remember correctly, I don't remember if it was 2015 or 2014. Right before I left the forums, my monster named Crystar was put up for sponsorship. I didn't put him up because at this point, for the 6 card set, I was so disillusioned with everything. I was hardly on the forums. I was there mostly to poke my head in the shout box and make sarcastic comments about what was going on.
Yeah.
Someone put my monster up for sponsorship.
Right.
I didn't put him up.
Yeah.
Now, I had a couple other monsters on the forums at this point. I had, because Crystar was one. I had Trokar, who was kind of like this well-rounded kind of battle adept, and I had Quintax. I think it was I called him. Yeah, Quintax, the Warlord. It was basically a warlord kaiju who led an army and was viewed as a god by his army. So he was revered. He fought space battles, all this other stuff, and he conquered planets. So it's like if you took the concept of like the Zellions from Monster Zero, reversed the roles, and made them revere the kaiju as a god. That's kind of what you got with Quintax. Very small kaiju, had to use weapons and energy projections and stuff. So what happened was, Crystar got in, and I was sent a congratulations note by Simon. I responded to Simon and said, I don't want Crystar in the game. I'd like to replace him with another monster.
Okay, and so you took him out like right as soon as like he approached you to say congratulations. Pretty
much, because I didn't expect him to win. Two, I don't really know how many votes he got. But at that point, some of the quality of the original monsters on there were very, very limited. I mean, I can show you a picture of the monster here I did, Crystal, originally, that got voted in.
Yeah.
So I can show you that really quick here. So what happened is I switched Crystar with Quintax and asked Simon if I could do that because, people actually voted for me for one. So I didn't want to completely
have their money go down the drain.
Right, because you had to remember, you have to spend money to vote and sponsor a character. That's the problem. Pop in here.
Okay, so, let's take a look.
So people spent money and voted for my monster. Okay, I feel kind of bad for that, but I went and I turned around and I asked Simon, it's like, okay, I want to switch. I don't want to put Crystar in there. I want to put another monster in there. And Simon's like wondering why. Well, why do you want to do this? I'm like, well, and I told him flat to his face.
Yeah.
The contract is very vague. I'm not comfortable with it. And based on what the wording in the contract says, I can't use them for other game developments, but I don't want that. I want to see about, there's some other projects I think he might fit better in than in Kaiju Combat. And so Simon and I spend about an hour going back and forth with his expectations. Like he was like asking, say, well, why can't we don't really switch out monsters? And I turned back on him. I was like, yes, you do. Because in the early days of the game, he did say that if you put in a monster for sponsorship and it gets voted in, you can switch that monster out for someone else, for another monster that you have.
Uh-huh.
You do the same thing at the voting level for from the card set to the game. You can do that. That is your choice. And we're going to leave that decision up to you, because there may be another monster you wanted to get in that didn't get in, stuff like that. So I pulled that around on Simon, and he wasn't too thrilled about that. So instead of Crystar, I put in Quintax as a different monster. And so we had a back and forth where Simon was trying to point out that Crystar would be a better fit, Quintax would not. He started putting these reasons like he wears armor, he's not really kind of kaiju-esque, and I pointed out to him all the members of the current roster, like his Quintax had intelligence. I'm sitting there going, you've already described at least a dozen other monsters you have in the roster that you're saying aren't applicable to kaiju and should make Quintax, ineligible for being kaiju, but yet you have these other characters in the game lore already. Don't try this. Don't argue logic with me on this, because I can beat you at it. I didn't say those in exact words, but that's kind of what it ended up turning into. So I told Simon to get Quintax, and he finally relented, and I got Quintax in there, and Crystar is still free to roam the interwebs as my own thing for some other fan projects that one of my friends is working on doing right now, which I'm kind of excited to see where that goes.
Cool.
I'm helping another kind of indie game thing for just close friends here, so it's just kind of fun.
Yeah.
So at that point, I posted in Crystar's forum that Crystar wants sponsorship, but on good conscience I can't keep him in there. So I'm going to pull Crystar out and replace him with Quintax. Here's a link for it. And I got a bunch of backlash for it. For it too. It's like, well, why did you do this? I'm sad to see. It's like, we voted for him. Why did you do this? I didn't say. I told it in very basic generic terms. I didn't name names. I didn't state reasons. But it was, at this point, I was so disillusioned with everything that there really wasn't any point anymore. So I just wanted to kind of bow out. I had another thread on there for some of my that I was basically using as a free advertisement for my artwork, for my DeviantArt site, linking back to and everything. So that's all I was using the forums for at that point. So I was just, my sketch thread had been closed. My actual artist thread, which I post kaiju work, non-kaiju related work, all this other stuff, that was still up. I eventually left that up there, and I closed down my other, and asked to have my other stuff closed down before I finally officially left. And by this point, we'd already lost a lot of the senior members. When I say senior members, I mean both people who had been there longest, but also the more mature ones, because even the more mature and older ones, because even then there are still some people on there who are very immature and don't understand exactly what they're doing, and are very high on their own monster. That's kind of one of the things you kind of get. It's the kaiju Sue.
Okay. It's like that original character. It's like, oh, this is my original character. It's like the best monster ever.
Right. No, that's it.
It's like got all these powers that can kick Godzilla's ass 5 times over.
Oh god, there is so much of that on that forum. There's so much of that in the Kaiju fandom even as well, and that pisses me off.
Original character, do not steal.
Exactly. That's kind of what happened to an extent. So
where it's just like kind of like a dick measuring contest between their monsters.
Right, and there are some that are even stated as being the god of monsters, or the most powerful monster ever, and the god.
I know who you're talking about.
Yes, you do, and I could go on for hours about how that is a horrible, horrible character. But that is not the topic we were discussing.
Right.
So, and so at this point, this is like middle of summer 2015. That I basically pulled Crystar out of Kaiju Combat, shut everything down, and then here's the other thing that happens at this time, just before this time. Simon starts sending out emails. Actually, no, about this time, Simon is contacting people saying to start pulling the Colossal Kaiju Combat logo from our artwork. primarily because the reason wasn't given explicitly as to why. And I think I know why.
Okay.
Was because Simon was realizing that the Colossal Kaiju Combat was kind of becoming a sinking ship and getting a lot of bad rep.
Yeah, it's at this point where it's like my friends within the kaiju community, internet kaiju community, would say like, "Is that game still going? I thought it was canceled." Like at this point, this is when the point where interest was, the game was losing interest and was kind of falling off the radar.
Right, and the thing is, years before, Simon said, "If you do any artwork for a Monster on here, you are more than free to use the logo on all of this stuff." On your artwork for any monster you want trying in the game, you are more than welcome to put your stuff on it, or put the logo on it, which a lot of us did. And there's hundreds upon hundreds of artworok, from fan creative monsters that had the logo on it.
Yeah, and they all had like a similar like gray background, similar to Matt Frank's work.
Right, it was kind of trying to mimic that style. Even that, you can even see that I did that.
Yeah, with the Crystar. Yeah.
So what ended up happening was, Simon is requesting that we all pull the CKC logo from our pictures that we had. Which is a very odd request because he was the one that said that we could use it because people asked him, "Hey, can we use this on anything we're submitting for CKC?" He's like, "Yeah, sure, go ahead. Perfect. He actually asked me specifically, I see you have the logos on these pictures. Can you please remove them?" I was like a little bit, okay. Why? You said we could use them originally. There was no problem. This is also about the point in time where Simon Strange cracked down and threatened a cease and desist against the people working the Kaiju Combat comic.
Oh, okay.
Here's the thing that's really screwed up about this too, because
did he okayed this comic to be made?
Yes, he did.
So he's putting a cease and desist on something he himself started.
Yes. Let me give you the full story here.
Okay, please do.
The fan members on the forums, especially some of the artists, and a lot of the artists there who want to back the project and help the project succeed, are trying to come up with ways to help advertise the system. They want to try and do a comic. Similar because Kaiju comics have kind of becoming a bit more of coming back.
Right, because like this was like Kaiju Combat kind of the whole thing started like a year after IDW was putting out their Godzilla comics.
Right, and this is currently going on during the middle of the run of Rulers of Earth.
Right, 2015, yeah.
So, the comic actually came out in 2014. Is when the comic officially came out, or at least that's when they had the first teaser for it, because I got a copy of the teaser for free from one of the writers, who's also one of my other kaiju friends here. So he got me a free copy, and I'm actually managed to get my hands on a PDF of the actual comic itself for free. So when we did this, it was when it was done, it was a handful. It was like Frankie B. Washington, a couple of other artists who wanted to help with like coloring and lettering and panel layouts and all this other stuff. We had a couple of writers working on stuff, so we had kind of a fairly group aptitude, but it was very, very. There was not a lot of money put towards it because it was all basically everything was just kind of fan made. So there was like no monetary incentive into this at all. But it had the official Kaiju Combat brand. It had Simon's blessing at first. So what happened was Simon said okay, but the weird thing about this was that Simon approved it, but did not give it official endorsement by Sunstone.
He approved it, but did not endorse it.
But did not give a full company support of it. Treated it as if it was just a fan product.
Yeah.
But yet gave it permission to use the CKC logo, the CKC characters, and was at the CKC booth.
I don't see the reasoning behind that, honestly.
I don't see the reasoning behind it. So they finished the comic. And Justin, and not Justin, someone else. Sorry. One of the writers who was one of my friends went and talked to him about this about like doing another comic or coming back to G-Fest and helping the booth and some stuff. And the topic of the comic came up in discussion, and Simon basically told them, "Stop what you're doing with the comic, or I'll be forced to do a cease and desist on." He never actually launched a cease and desist, but he basically halted any kind of forward progress with the comic.
Uh-huh.
Out of nowhere.
Did he give any reason?
I don't recall if there was a reason, or even if there was a reason, it was so nonsensical. When you listen to Simon talk, he talks a good PR game, but if you listen to politicians, you know when he's talking bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think the excuse he gave was some kind of weird legal conflict of things, but again, remember, the comic was supported by Simon, allowed to use official Kaiju Combat stuff, was at the booth with CKC, but was not given an official endorsement as an official Sunstone product.
Mm-hmm.
It's even for sale still, I think, on DriveThruRPG.
What? So, I guess he never really did win with that cease and desist if it's still on sale.
I want to check right now because I do not remember, but I do know it was for sale on DriveThruRPG.
Mm-hmm.
Right, no, I don't see it on DriveThruRPG anymore. It was maybe on DriveThruComics. Sorry, it was still on there as a comic. Okay, there's World War Kaiju, Terra Kaiju. Yeah, Colossal Kaiju Combat Phase 1 is for sale on there.
Wow.
For $3.
So much for, legal problems.
Right, so I don't quite understand what Simon's accent was, because at this time he's starting to pull all of the freaking, this is when he's pulling back the logos on stuff. Yeah. I don't know if he understands what he's doing.
What is his logic, his reasoning behind, shutting down all these things? He understands Kaiju Combat is getting a bad rap. So in order to get a bad rap, he wants to have less people be aware of it?
I don't understand quite the reasoning for it, but I think it may have something to do with it's already getting a bad rap. As this very horribly ran, indie-funded, fan-ran project. And Simon, I think at this point, is already getting a bad enough reputation in the Kaiju community for kind of being able to... And maybe not keeping promises.
And maybe even within, the game development community.
Here's the interesting thing about the game development community, because currently CKC and Sunstone, I think, is either owned by or has tried to become a subsidiary of Pipeworks.
Uh-huh.
Simon tried within the last couple of years to get Pipeworks to help work on the game.
Mm-hmm.
I think Pipeworks may actually own part of CKC.
Uh-huh.
I do not know for certain, but I do know that he was going and working with Pipeworks to help finish the game.
Uh-huh.
And that was the last I had heard of it. And then we got this message here in May about CKC is now on roughly...
Indefinite hiatus.
Indefinite hiatus. I want to say suspended, because it's not canceled.
Right. It's in a gray area. It's not canceled, but it is practically canceled. It's technically...
It's canceled, but not canceled.
Yeah, it's technically not canceled.
No, the term for it at this point is developmental hell.
Yes, the infamous developmental hell that has affected many pieces of entertainment throughout the years.
Except for Meg. Apparently we're getting Meg sometime next year. I'm kind of excited, but I'm also kind of disappointed. But yeah, so it's right now it's in developmental hell.
Uh-huh. Since May.
Simon,
and apparently he wants to he wants to start working on the game around November, December, January. He's claiming that he's going to come back with some sort of news, or at least he's going to have some. He's hoping to have some kind of progress be made, if any, around November, December, January.
He's not. I'll be quite frank and honest. I will be damn surprised if he does, based on his past track record. And the other thing, that during this entire developmental process, he was supposed to be transparent with where the money is going. Because myself,
he stopped doing that around 2014.
Yes, he stopped being very transparent with where the money went. I think partially because one of the first animator crews, or one of the first animators he got for making the models and stuff, took the money and ran. I think I heard a rumor that the animator bought a motorcycle with the money and was posting pictures of it on Facebook or social media or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Specifically, again,
sounds a lot like what happened with what was it with Kaiju Gaiden, with one of the David Hall or using the money for a wedding or something.
Right. No, just a horrible misallocation of funds.
Uh-huh.
Plus, it came to the fact that the card game was also siphoning funds. when the card game was supposed to be used and the sponsorships were used to be able to put stuff back in. Here's something else about the card set.
Yeah.
That I got exceedingly ticked off at Simon for trying to pull.
Mm-hmm.
So after Quintax wins, and I had this whole back and forth with Simon about putting Quintax in the game instead of Crystar.
Right.
He starts a massive thread starts a multi-person PM with myself and several of the other winners of the 6 card set.
Uh-huh.
In that note, he is saying that he wants us to buy a full set as winners. He wants us to buy a full set of the card game.
You're winners. Now give me your money.
Yes, you won. Now, as part of your arrangement for winning, you need to buy a full set of the card game. Basically what it boiled down to. I was freaking flabbergasted by the audacity. We're using Audacity and it's his Audacity. For wanting to make us buy a card set. And I'm sitting here going, I don't want a full card set of your shitty game. I would want my monster and maybe like a handful of other monsters that belong to my friends. That's it. I don't want anything else to do with the shitty card game that you are wasting so much of our time and money on.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and we brought up to Simon before in a couple of comments about whether or not the money to the card game is even worth it. His response was, the card game is basically paying for itself.
Mm-hmm.
No extra funds are getting sent to CKC at this time. So some of our logical responses were, if that's the case, why don't we just spend the money on the damn game and not this frivolous bullshit?
Uh-huh.
To which there was, again, the wonderful political rewording of stuff that we all knew was basically bullshit. So where does that leave us today? I haven't been on CKC in about a year and a half, if not 2 years by now. Maybe closer to a year. I can't remember exactly when I left. I do know it was back last summer, either before or after G-Fest I left.
Right.
And I avoided Simon Strange. I avoided Simon 2015. I tried to avoid him whenever I went by the Kaiju booth.
At the G-Fest 2015.
At G-Fest 2015, because they had the Kaiju Combat booth there, and I kind of tried to avoid him. I went and played a little bit of the game, but there wasn't much. He knew who I was. The other funny thing was either 2014 or 2015, before I left, when I was still kind of semi-active on the forums at this time. I think 2014. Yeah, 2014 is what happened. He PM'd me to offer me the chance to do the evolution cards for one of the sets. I was and I asked him for more details because I was a little bit curious because I was trying to do a lot more commissions at the time, trying to see what it was, I was trying to see what was going on. He said he needed them done by like October 30th. He PM'd me about the second week of October, I think. So I had like maybe 2 or 3 weeks to get all this done. He wanted 6 evolution sets done, 6 evolution cards done. I wanted him to pay me for them. I asked him how much he was paying for them. I want to pay you $300. That's $50 each. I thought about it for about a day or two. It's like, so let me think about this because that's really below my normal commission price. So, but let me think about it. And I'll get back to you. So I spent about a day and a half thinking about it. And I turned him down because for the main reason of my skills are worth more than that. So turned him down for that. So yeah, that's some of my experiences with the entire thing and what I've heard from people involved in the comic side of it, in the development side of it, because also the collaborations were also nightmarish too. Several of them were really bad, and several of the people on the forums who have these things of this is my monster, this is what it is, it does not deviate from what I want it to be.
Yeah.
Cannot compromise worth crap, and they refuse to, and that bogs it down so much, and it makes it such a rough time for anyone involved. And it doesn't help that Simon doesn't what Simon thinks is cool doesn't really work for what the monsters are working with. I remember he wanted to have one of the robotic cybernetic monsters be on a single unicycle wheel like Gizmo Duck. And we're all sitting there dumbfounded at this revelation going, the hell is he thinking? No! No! I like Gizmo Duck, but no!
Mm-hmm.
There was some other stuff about... Oh, that's another good one. Because Matt would often put a design sketch of some stuff he's working on. He would do a design sketch and he would go over stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There was a big hullabaloo about one of them that where the monster itself, designed by the creator, is a mess. It's a mess of just lines with no variation, no definition. Matt did a sketch that was like, if you did this would, if your monster looked more like this, it would be freaking perfect. But no, it wasn't what the creator wanted. The creator took Matt's picture, redrew, added everything else to it that it was apparently missing.
Yeah.
And then it went back to Matt, and we're all sitting there going, why? Why? But, and some of them Matt had a lot of freedom on. And some of them also had a lot of feedback from Simon that turned it into kind of a bit more of a little bit of a clusterfuck than normal. Now, don't get me wrong. Matt Frank is really, really good at what he does. He's really good at kaiju. He's good at mechanics.
Yeah.
He's not good at a lot of different styles of robots.
Yeah, I remember you told me about that one robot by
right.
Raptor Gear.
Raptor Gear, right. Which Raptor Gear is a great guy. So let's take into account Gigaraptor, which is this massive Archaeopteryx-based mech.
Robot dragon. Bird-like robot dragon, right?
It's an Archaeopteryx.
Oh, sorry.
Believe me, I know my stuff.
Yeah.
I know Raptor
yeah.
Gear. It's based off of an Archaeopteryx. Now, Matt's design is really cool, but in the original designs for Gigaraptor has more of a Gundam chassis. An
angular pointed chest.
Angular pointed chest, harder angles. Matt drew it with more of a transformer body, more soft, rounder edges, rounder sides.
Like a War for Cybertron, like the War for Cybertron video games.
Right. So a lot more softer and rounded. Now, don't get me wrong, Matt's really good at mechs, better than I am, but he's not good at a lot of different styles of mechs, which he's all going to improve. He's really good at what he does do. He's pushing himself to be better at it. So it's nothing against him personally. I think he could do some different robot designs and different robot styles would definitely help him out. But that was one of the big things with that. There were others that came up, and there were other characters that are just so damn popular across the board that it's just dumbfounding. Grimgrawl.
That was
the alligator.
The zombie gator.
The zombie alligator that's animated with two souls of two conflicting personalities, but is female. Although the spirits inhabiting it currently are male and a female. With Grimgrawl in particular, got very popular, but the creator stated, and this is a lot of feedback from Matt and Simon during the collaboration process, if I remember correctly, was originally started off as a haunted, parade float or parade balloon float.
Grimgrawl.
Grimgrawl's originally, if I remember right, was originally going to be like a parade float or parade balloon that gained sentience or was haunted. So they then turned it into this voodoo alligator zombie monstrosity, which is infinitely cooler.
Yeah.
And I know some of the other ones where it was a lot of the creator clashing with Simon or Matt on how stuff was to be done. So the collaboration process was could run very smooth, could be very, very troublesome on both sides. And I've had several people who have already gone through the collaboration process. And again, some of them just go really, really easy. Everyone's on the same page, and there's some that are the collaborators don't know what they want exactly, and they go through and go with that. There's the horseshoe crab, not the horseshoe crab. The hermit crab.
Oh, with the little.
Yes, Prospect Pete. That's what it is. Prospect Pete.
You look like Stinky Pete from Toy Story 2.
Yes, that is one of my favorite freaking monsters we've done.
Yeah.
lot of people hated it. I'm like, no, this thing is freaking adorable. Do you not see how adorable this is?
Yeah. Well, two of my personal favorites. There was one where it was like a centipede monster on top of a giant chameleon.
Yes, I know. Oh, yeah, the dual one, the 2-1. Yes,
yeah.
Yes. The kaiju that are too small on their own to do much, but you put them together and they're there to be a unit. That one's pretty neat.
The other one I liked was a purple and yellow sea monster called Tian Lung, which looked like a purple and yellow Titanosaurus with a long neck and raptor feet.
Tian Lung's description is that it was a genetically created dragon because the genetic creator wanted to have a dragon.
Mm-hmm.
And went too far and pulled a John Hammond, and therefore we have a dragon that is just literally a bitch.
Yeah. Another one I liked was Sarcostion, which was like a Dunsculosis fish.
Oh, Dunkleosis. Yes, I actually remember sketching that. Actually,
mm-hmm.
I actually originally sketched that when I was still just an original monster on the forums, but had just gotten into I think card set 3. Maybe 4.
Yeah, I remember I first saw him on the card set.
But yeah, he got in and was good. Hofo Pepe is another really cool one. But then again, here's the difficulty with cool designs like this.
Mm-hmm.
How do they function in game?
Yeah, that's another thing I was thinking about.
For Hofo Pepe, the animation's got to be good. It's got to be able to float and move,
and it's got to be original at the same time. Because looking back at like Simon Strange's work, he previously worked on a game called Rampage: Total Destruction, which was a reboot of the Rampage video game franchise. And they would boast that the game had 30 monsters, 40 if you on the Wii version, but there were only ever like 5 skins. It was 5 like character models. Just repeated across 40 monsters. So I'm thinking like, yeah, this is when I was starting to doubt the game. It was like probably around like 2014 where I started noticing that there hasn't been any real updates on the game itself, but rather just more and more and more monsters being introduced every week up for Monster Monday. And at which point I'm thinking to myself, how exactly are they going to be able to work with all of these monsters and still make each of them unique and given their own sense of identity? And I remember sorry, go ahead.
Here's the other thing about now that you bring that up, brings up another thing to segue into what the game was intended to do.
Yeah.
The game intended was to be kind of like this pick and block, like where you can add these mods. That would not reskin characters. A lot of people were doing reskins on a whole bunch of other stuff, doing their own stuff because there are actually talented people that do that crap.
Mm-hmm.
What we have here is originally intent was like, okay, so we're going to have the Fall of Nemesis game, and it's going to be kind of like a weird kind of building blocks where you could mix and match from the different expansions.
Right.
What you wanted in there.
This is when we get into like what I guess we can call like the what not to call the pipe dream, like the pipe dream or like the pie in the sky, like fantasy goal of having multiple different expansion packs and being able to like put them together like Lego sets, as Simon would often describe them as.
Right. So what it was originally intended to do was like you'd have the Kaiju Combat original characters.
Mm-hmm.
You would also have the Toho characters.
Yeah, that's when
their own expansion kind of game with their own mechanics that you could meld into each other to do a cross-platform, cross-game kind of monster. You'd also do they were going to do the Gamera series, some of the Ultraman series. We're going to try and do some of the other Western giant monsters that we've had. He
would advertise Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and this is when we got it. This is like looking back on it now. Like I was fooled by this. I loved this premise. But then it's like looking back on it like 4 years later, not only is it just a pie in the sky, but it's like when he was pitching his Kickstarter by selling us on the idea of a game rather than selling us on an actual game.
Right. So here's the other thing that came up with this, because I remember hearing this too. When I heard this, like, that sounds so neat and so cool, and how are you going to get Toho, Daiei, and all these other companies to agree to this?
Yeah.
Because once they find out what you're doing, there's going to be some legal elbows from the sky coming your way. How are you going to get them to agree to this?
I mean, sure, like, you've got the Lego games, like, like Lego
Lego
has done both like Lego Marvel video games and Lego DC video games, and even when
and they've got Lego, they also have the Lego Dimensions, which is basically just throwing everything else together.
But they never got to have. They had DC characters for Lego Dimensions, but never Marvel characters for Lego Dimensions. So, despite the fact that Lego could do this, even they could not bring DC and Marvel together in the same video game.
Even in the Lego movie, you never see a Marvel character.
Right.
You see only DC. Characters.
Yeah.
Because, part of that is because the company that did Lego movie was a Warner
Brothers.
Company.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, that brought up the question for me early on about how the hell were they going to do this, but then became more and more concerned with how the hell are they just going to get the game off the ground?
Right, it's like, as the years kept going by, that ultimate goal of, expansion packs and eventual, trademarked, licensed monsters, that became farther and farther and farther away. That goal became farther and farther away when we couldn't even get the fucking original game itself to get off the ground. I mean, here is the other part of it that's also really kind of just disheartening to find out about. Mm-hmm.
Jeremy Robinson is still advertising the game in his books. Project Hyperion came out last...
The dude has put out,
October?
3 or 4 books at this point?
4.
He's got
4. Project Nemesis, Project Mygo, Project 731, now Project Hyperion.
And also, it's also funny, looking at how much time has passed. Kaiju Combat came out, was the Kickstarter first came out during the dark period of 2012, the dark period of the Godzilla franchise, where we had nothing to go on outside of the comics, and now we've got 2 full-blown movies at this point. In the time that it's taken for Kaiju Combat to get off the fucking ground and get off of the alpha stage, we've had 2 movies, a bunch of books from Jeremy Robinson, we got an entire Godzilla video game out, and a lot of shit has gone down since then.
But I want to go back to this point here, which I think is rather important, is that Jeremy Robinson is still pitching the game as something that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think, if I remember right, I did not get Project Hyperion because my opinion on Jeremy Robinson's writing for Project Nemesis and Project Mygo were damn good. I enjoyed the crap out of them. Started getting a little bit over the top. Some of the aspects of them, I'm not going to spoil them for any of your watchers if you haven't read them. I would read Project Nemesis and Project Mygo and I'd stop. Get to Project 31, shit starts hitting the fan as Jeremy just starts... Well, Jeremy started this in Project Mygo, but he starts, pushing together this cross... how do I put this? This kind of...
Cross-genre?
He's trying to create his own novella universe.
The narrative universe.
He's combining Island 731, which is currently being drawn by Jeff Zornow. He already did the Project Nemesis with Matt Frank for the 6-issue comic release. There's another novel he did that they're all getting combined into this massive kind of Nemesis universe. So it's really kind of, it's kind of funny, but also kind of annoying. But yeah, after, reading Project 731, I was just kind of a little bit bored with it. And bored with the series, so I kind of stopped there. But even in Project 731, I still saw advertisements for Colossal Kaiju Combat. Project Mygo, actually, the funny thing for your readers to know is that I actually submitted several pieces of work to be printed in Project Mygo. I actually did a 6-page comic adaptation of one of my favorite parts in Project Nemesis.
Oh, cool.
Which was towards the end of the book. It's actually on my DeviantArt right now. As well as some of the other pictures that I did and I submitted. He even printed one I did not give him permission to print, but I didn't realize that, because I just showed that off to him just because of what I thought happened during that scene. But he printed it without permission. I'm like, okay, I can't stop it now. But yeah, so I'm kind of a little bit bored with that. But the point is that he's still plugging the game as if it's going to happen at this point.
You think he's doing it as a legal necessity?
I don't know.
Because
I
again, his name is still attached. His property is still attached to this.
His monster is attached to it because he put in enough money for it to get his. Because if I remember correctly, there was a. If I remember the Oya Kickstarter correctly, I think even the original Kickstarter was. So you go through the collaboration process of getting your monster in the game was $500 there. If you did 10,000, you instantly got a monster into the game into the first release of the game. That I think is what Jeremy Robinson did. If I do not know for certain, so you guys don't start hunting me down and cyberbullying me or whatever. I don't know if that's what Jeremy did. Was to dish out that $10,000 to get Nemesis into the game. I think part of the reason he's still pushing for it is because his monster is attached to it as something for the game.
Yeah, it's his name. Monster's name is in the title of the game.
Right. So that's kind of what he's. I think that's kind of why he's still pushing it as much as he is.
He's already invested so much time and literal time and money into it. It's like, I better see this thing play through. See this thing through.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
So it's kind of like, I guess, like, should we like look through this like supposed announcement just to see like what sort of message Simon is like, what sort of excuse Simon is giving the fans, and just how true is it to what's really going on?
I think that'd be a good place to go for the next step, unless you have any more specific questions.
Let's see. Not so much. I mean, just like after going through all of the events of what has gone on, it's like, it's very unfortunate to hear, and it's also kind of sad to see. Like, I was looking on the forums right now, like right before we started recording, and I even showed to you that there are still people like still desperately clinging on to the hope that this game is going to come out, even though there are people out there who are just like, no, it's dead. They can't just admit it. This project is dead. It's like, no, it's not dead until Simon says it's dead. We still have hope for this game. Something's going to happen in December, just like what he said. And it's like, just listening to your story, to your experience, to you like giving your experience on the store, on what happened. It's like, it seems like this was kind of a shit show from the get-go. And now at this point, almost everyone who was involved in the project, save for Simon himself, has kind of dropped off. So now, like, any initial support, any of the bigger supporters outside of Simon and Jeremy Robinson, has kind of like already jumped ship. So it's like, without those main backers, all you really have are just these very sad individuals left to cheer on for this project, support this project.
I don't know Matt's personal opinions on the matter. Anytime I've talked with him, I've been meaning to bring it up, but never has actually come up in conversation. So I don't know Matt's entire side of the story. So I really can't comment on that aspect of it. But if I remember correctly, I don't think he has art director for Sunstone Games as listed as one of his employment history, or it's on his employment history or something. He may just remember that. I don't know for certain what happened with that. So I don't know Matt's story on this, fortunately, which would be another way to try and get some more input on this. But a lot of this entirely it's an entire. It was lured in by sweet promises and then nothing.
Yeah. I can't help but compare this scenario to what happened with Mighty No. 9, where it was another situation where a guy was trying to sell his audience on the idea of a game rather than having anything up front to show potential backers, what he's capable of. He was trying to sell the game based on his name alone, despite his limited involvement with previous projects of the past. And eventually you get an inexperienced developer working on a game that turned out to be a disappointment. Only difference is that Mighty No. 9 was actually released, whereas Kaiju Combat still isn't off the ground 4 years later.
And that's pretty much kind of what happened here. Is we have someone who has some history in game development. Don't get me wrong. He does have some titles under his name, but I think for what specifically he wanted to do, just did not have the resources or the talent behind it to make it work. And we can get some pretty cool art. We can get some pretty cool stuff coming out of it. But I think part of the other thing is that Matt's name recognition helped with the second Kickstarter to get it off the ground. And especially more and more because I do follow him on DeviantArt, and seeing all of these pictures come up, because I'll occasionally go to his DeviantArt to see what's up, and I see the Kaiju Combat stuff. That's where I first saw Mulligan. I'm like, oh my god, what is this? I'm looking at it going, this is a golf monster. This is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then, of course, with Chroma Squad, there was some cross-promotional material there because we had, like, 3 of the Kaiju were set up as to be, like, the big bad villains.
Of this, like, Power Rangers-inspired game.
Which is actually really fun, and I need to start playing it again because I had a lot of fun with it when I played it first. So, I actually have some of my first couple of episodes playing the game on my YouTube channel, which is like I don't know what I'm doing with that. Whether or not I want to be a commentary thing, or if I want to do a game commentary thing, or a Let's Play channel. I don't know what I want to do with it. I still don't know what I want to do with it.
But I feel like I do want to have one more thing. Do you think that this game would have been funded in this if Simon were to have started Kaiju Combat like the exact same way with no real assets other than like basic concept art and no real team behind him except just Matt Frank? Do you think the game still would have been funded if the Kickstarter project was launched in 2016 in an era where we've had so many other games like Mighty Number 9 or Bloodstained Ritual of the Night or Yooka-Laylee, who have all tried to do something different, who all tried to show more to get their games funded?
I don't think so, primarily because I think that Simon has some name recognition, but not enough. Now, say we had some other people who actually had more game experience. I mean, Matt Frank alone will probably draw a lot of numbers. He does draw he has a lot of pull, a lot of pull. In the fandom itself and in comics and Transformers and all this other stuff that he's involved in. But I don't think that pull would be enough to get a lot of people interested in what this, especially with how much it takes to get a video game made and how much it costs. So that in and of itself was that in and of itself, I don't think in 2016 where we've had several failures of Kickstarters to deliver on the promises. Even though it's still a good way to get investment into an idea, but usually that investment needs more of a fan base to build from. Usually. In this instance, if the Kickstarter for CKC were to start up brand spanking new today, with just Simon Strange and Matt Frank, I don't think it would raise half of the money that it needed to get funded. I do not honestly think it would. But I also know that with the fact that it's done, and here's the thing: the first Kickstarter, and there's also the first Kickstarter, it did fail. Let's remember this: first Kickstarter did failed. Second Kickstarter succeeded, but not by a large margin. The third Kickstarter we did for the Oya project as a means to try and get us money because we were still desperate for money at that time. Blew up in our face. So that I don't think it would survive in this current climate right now. There's too much scrutiny. There's too many examples of bad writing or of bad Kickstarters that promise a lot but don't deliver. And even with a project as ambitious as this, I think people might be a little bit more skeptical on whether or not to fund this. No matter how cool it sounds, just the practicality of getting it done, especially this way, is one thing. And I also want to point out that there have been some podcasts and some live streams of Simon with another individual. I don't know who on earth it is. I really don't. Working towards showing off particle effects and some of this other stuff. And I'm trying to remember if this is true or not. Again, this is a rumor I think I've heard, was that some of the money for CKC may have gone towards
that other project.
Not that other project, but like I think more personal expenses for Simon's family. Now, I don't know that for certain. I remember hearing a rumor about it, but again, I do not know for certain. It's hearsay, and I'll admit that it's full out hearsay, but that is something to try and check into. But yeah, there was just a lot that went on. And even in the design team thread, in the design team forum, where only people with DTM clearance could get to, there was really not a lot going on that we could really do or really work with here, because all the threads were started by people who said, wouldn't it be cool if we had X?
Mm-hmm.
Or how do we implement Y into the game? Or how do we do all of this stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Or should we bother implementing this? And Simon mentioned about having some kind of intro scenes between the characters where they get introduced into it, similar to the style of Melee or Save the Earth, where you have like the Godzilla 90s and just does this standing slow roar.
Yeah.
And you get like a Moth or Rodan, and Rodan swoops in and lands. Like have introduction scenes like that, but more like a comic book style.
Yeah.
With that introduction theme, we had I had a cool idea for Dragon Lotus, just sitting there in her human form, meditating, and you just hear the siren, and the panel starts breaking down as she awakes, and she runs towards the entrance to the temple that she's meditating at, and then jumps into the fray as she does her Dragon Lotus transformation into her kaiju form and gets ready to battle. So there's stuff like that was talked about, but nothing was ever really taken into serious consideration. And I think especially since he took out blocking is when I really started losing interest in the game, because if like say several of the people on the forums knew how to play fighting games. Blocking is a very good tactic,
right?
Because that's that competitive edge to it. But these are younger kids who think that blocking is cheating, which you can get around that by putting in, like, every time you block, there's a bit of health. You still lose a bit of health.
Yeah.
Still happens. It's still programmed in some games.
Or maybe if you block too much, like, the longer you block, the more detrimental it is to your health or to your...
Diminishing returns, right?
Yeah, almost like even like Smash Brothers, where, like, if you hold block, then you get paralyzed for a couple seconds.
Right. Or... Yeah, but the other thing is that there actually was already a mechanic to get around a block was to do a charge. And so that was one of the things that no one really realized, except some of my friends who play fighting games and have played the games a lot and would actually just completely beat people they're really annoyed by on a daily basis. But you can break a block by charging. Now you could do that. That was in the game's code, and no one caught on to that until they removed blocking entirely.
It would have been nice if Simon were to let us know that. Right,
but I don't think it was actually brought up as a valid option before. So it's kind of the handling of the game and the information for the game very, very poorly done, I think. In that extensive case, because there's, and in going into it again, you're all. And I think and back to the previous question, even if it did get crowdfunded, we still run into the same problem of you have non-game developers, non-game workers, and non-game people trying to make a fighting game who have no experience in the field, no experience in development and game development, no idea of what they're really needing to be looking for and keep in mind. And you have like a handful of people who are like, I don't think that's right, but I think we need to dial it back a bit, because it was another issue of, like you said, our ambitions outstretched our ability. So in that specific case, I think is what made it very, very damaging to the thing was we went through with all these ambitions, and it just fell down like a house of cards. And I know Simon saying that he wants it's on a permanent hiatus. I'm sorry, unless there is a massive donation of money to hire a competent crew, this project is dead.
Yeah, unless you were to somehow pull like a Hail Mary move and get Pipeworks to own everything about the game, own Sunstone,
I don't know how much they own, if anything, of Sunstone. If I remember right, I know there was a partnership going on, but I don't know the specifics of that. So,
or maybe he were to sell all of these assets, the entirety of Kaiju Combat in Sunstone. Maybe he could sell it to like another bigger company.
Again, and here's the other thing that goes with that contract, vagueness. You just cheated about 150 to 200 people out of their original
monsters
intellectual property.
Yeah.
You just cheated them out of that to a bigger company who isn't going to give a damn what the creator thinks, because technically Sunstone owns it.
Right.
And if Sunstone is either is working in tandem with Pipeworks, or Pipeworks now owns Sunstone as a subsidiary. Pipeworks, as a larger whole, now owns those monsters. Like, it isn't going to give a damn what the creators say.
Or imagine, like, if you were to sell all of Kaiju Combat's assets to, like, Activision, and then Activision ends up turning all these monsters into, like, Skylanders. Like, Skylanders Kaiju Force, and then it's like...
That would be awesome, I'm not going to lie, but that still brings the same thing of the creators...
Yeah.
The creators' choices are going to get freaking thrown out the window. Right.
Your monsters are just relegated to toys, and you get none of the... nothing out of it.
You get no royalties whatsoever, and that's the other thing. The contract...
You told me, no money exchanges hands.
No money exchanges hands to the people who created this stuff.
So yeah,
we don't get paid.
You know how popular, like, in this theoretical situation, you know how popular Skylanders are. So it's like all that is sold, you get none of it. You get no credit. I
don't even know if you give credit for. You might get credit for the design, but you wouldn't get credit. You wouldn't get any kind of monetary backing for it.
Yeah.
For how popular the thing that you made is, and that's kind of what Sunstone. That's kind of what the contract cheats people out of. But people were more looking through it with rose-colored glasses, going, "I want to get my monster in a game. And it's mine. I got something in a game." Or in some people's cases, "My monster's going to be so freaking popular. It's going to be amazing, and this game's going to help me launch my popularity even more." Or, "My monster is so goddamn awesome, everyone's going to know how goddamn awesome my monster is."
And also, because this game is, like, not... Like, here's the question. If the game does get officially canceled, do the video game rights to your monster revert back to you?
I don't know. The contract never states that.
So it's like you could have permanently lost all video game rights to your property, intellectual property.
Right. And here's the thing. Some of my friends... Again, I have a very large selection of friends from CKC that are very perceptive and have resources that I don't have the exact access to, but I know when I'm reading something, wait a minute, this doesn't make any damn sense. They actually had legal representation look over the contract, and the legal representation was really worried about why anyone would sign the contract with Sunstone. Because of that very vague legal room that they use, and the very vague legal verbiage that they decided to go with. So that's, again, one of the reasons why, and again, I told Simon, the wording on the contract is exceedingly vague. It does worry me as the IP owner for this creature, for this character, and you're going to do whatever the hell you want with it. I'm not entirely okay with that. So that in itself is kind of how that feels. And again, if Sunstone buys it, where do your rights go? No one knows, because it's not really explicitly said in the contract. If Sunstone goes under and files bankruptcy or whatnot, I don't know how bankruptcy works specifically. Like, what happens to the right of these characters? Do we just get cheated out of a whole bunch of intellectual property and a whole bunch of intellectual backing that we have to hope for the goodness out of people's hearts to either give us some financial backing or at least give us our monster back? That's kind of what some people are hoping for, but honestly, the world ain't going to be that nice to them. You've lost your monster. You signed away its soul, basically, to a company and a man who really doesn't know how to operate his shit. And you're paying for it, and this is one of the things that you should have been aware of looking at the contract, but you guys were so more concerned with getting your monster in a game that you didn't care. And I'll be fair, there are some of my friends who don't really care about that aspect anymore because they still have their character, because basically what it turns into is Sunstone owns that particular interpretation of that character. Whatever Sunstone makes, they own that. So you can have a different interpretation of the character, same name, same stuff, almost similar appearance, whatnot, but Sunstone owns that other interpretation of the character, you still have yours, which I don't think that's quite how it works. Especially with copyright law, I don't think that's exactly how it works. So, again, a lot of crazy stuff happened with this here, guys. It's not the nicest story, and there's a lot that went on in the last 4 years, 4 to 6 years. So,
and now you know, and knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe. Sorry.
Da-dun.
Da-dun. So again, I don't know what else to go over here unless you have any specific questions about what other roles I had into it, what else I did, or how how I handled everything that got tossed our way. I don't know what else you want to go.
It's all right. I think we've pretty much gone over everything. So it's just, I think the last thing to do before we wrap this up is just look over like Simon's very last announcement for this game and just see just like where he has left the fans off with this announcement.
Okay, so for those of you who don't know, Simon Strange, the forerunner of the game, the head of the project, and the head of Sunstone, posted on
the Kaiju Combat
CKC forums on basically what's happening with Fall of Nemesis, the first official, again, air quotes, game of the Colossal Kaiju Combat franchise, which was to feature about 11 to 12 monsters, with Nemesis being the big baddie.
Mm-hmm.
And the introduction of these not Kaijuden, or Kaijin, which are these physical embodiments, or the spiritual soul embodiments of stuff. There is actually a plot for this game.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone for Fall of Nemesis, if anyone wants to know what the plot is, I can go over that right now before we go any further, because there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on here. The basic plot is that we have Ikamajin, which was again another Kaiju Land battle character, if I remember.
Was that like the green and purple squid monster?
Yes.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, it's also Kaiju Land battle creature. But Ikamajin is basically being watched and, for lack of a better word, sponsored by these three aspects of what a kaiju is. You've got power, you've got speed, you've got durability, and you've got just kind of damage kind of thing. So you've got these three spiritual aspects of what makes up a kaiju, who are giving this creature basically all of their blessings, and basically has all of their power. Well, Ikamajin comes to Earth, and he's basically this massive creature that was who leveled planets under the direction of this fallen civilization that no longer exists, but just like fells planets,
like a
systems.
Galactus type of character.
Not really Galactus, more like King Ghidorah.
Oh, okay.
King Ghidorah with just unbridled power, and of course the blessings of the Kaijin give him more strength to the point where it's no longer a challenge, and the Kaijin are bored. So they bring him to Earth. They guide him to Earth, where there's all these other kaiju at, and the first being that Ikamajin runs into is Nemesis, the god of judgment and justice and retribution, who gets stronger the more, if I remember correctly from the storyline, gets stronger the more that the creature she's fighting has sinned, which again, very, very, very subjective interpretations of moral black and white here. So
yeah,
there's that. She beats Ikamajin handily, and ends up receiving through her victory the Kaijin's blessings. The Kaijin are completely stunned by this, to the point where they decide to make this a game, and they decide to go out into the world, into Earth, to find which seems to be popular with kaiju. That's the one thing I never understood. Why Earth is always a magnet for these kaiju to come and go at.
Yeah.
And just congregate. So the Kaijin come up with the idea of, we're going to hold a contest, a tournament. Go out and pick your champions. Because they can't openly strip their blessings from Nemesis. Someone has to beat her to get them back. So they kind of go out through, spiritual loophole or whatever, and start selecting their kind of champions based on fighting styles and preference, and then pit them up against one another to get the chance to go at Nemesis. And that's how you get the Fall of Nemesis. That's the plot of the first game.
Was that also the plot of the comic book?
No, plot of the comic book completely different. Plot of the comic book was completely different. It even featured some characters that weren't going to be in Fall of Nemesis, actually.
Okay.
Because you had Microsaurus and the polar bear, ice bear.
Yeah.
I can't remember what the name of the thing is. As well as the steampunk turtle.
I remember the steampunk turtle.
Chalondra, I think. Chalondra.
Yeah.
Which Chalondra wasn't going to be in Fall of Nemesis. So the comic really didn't follow that, although I had actually wanted to pitch, until I found out that Simon wasn't going to approve any kind of script that featured the Kaijin, for some damn reason, I was going to pitch to him basically an example of that plot, an expansion of that plot, where we get to delve into we get to build up to where Ikamaji gets beaten by Nemesis. We get to see the other kaiju kind of being influenced by the kaijin's influence into them being kaiju, all this other stuff, and then end up going up in the build up to the start of the game and give that more build up.
Mm-hmm.
I will admit that some of that again it was a really good idea and plot for it. I think it would have been really cool for the comic to do, but that didn't come through, and it was turned down. I think that would have been a better way of marketing it instead of just having these random kaiju fights.
Yeah.
And I wasn't too thrilled with the writing for the Kaiju Combat comic, to be honest.
Because giant monsters, we've seen plenty of them at this point, especially and
it wasn't just that. It was just the writing of the human characters I wasn't really enthralled by.
Mm-hmm.
It really didn't stick with me that much.
Mm-hmm.
And some of I had some other issues with the Kaiju Combat comic, but those are neither here nor there.
All right. So that would have been Fall of Nemesis.
Roughly, that's kind of the background for Fall of Nemesis, as for that game specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And that was again going to be launched after Kaiju Land Battles was finished, because again, that's part of the legalities of we already made an agreement with this other bigger company who gave us a bit of money to do their characters into kind of our fighting style engine that we're going to build. And, go from there.
All right. So, this is pretty much what Simon wrote. He mentions, which I'm quoting, development on Fall of Nemesis is being suspended. That means we are no longer actively doing development work, such as destruction, new monsters, environments, audio, story, videos, etc. We will update the store page on Steam in the next week or two to make this clear, and we'll be sending out updates via an update message via Kickstarter. He did none of that. None of that's been done because the last video I saw that I had any kind of dealing with, specifically in the last time the game was available for play at G-Fest in 2015, there was no destructive environments. There was a playable city environment, but it was a very, very sparsely populated city, like something you would expect out in rural Kansas, but didn't even feel like a city. It was like a couple of tall buildings, some pine trees, very flat ground, no topography whatsoever, and that's about it. Yeah. This was back in, let's see, exactly what date was this? This was May
20th?
May 4th, 2014. It's been roughly 4 months since then. And
2016, you mean?
2016, sorry. May 4th, 2016. And it is September as of this recording, late September as of this recording, and there has been no message on Kickstarter, on Steam, and no emails to any backers. This is the only way you can find out the current status of the game officially.
Is on the website.
Yes. Okay.
Or is on the forums. Forums, I should say.
So, CKC is not cancelled. The forums are not being shut down. Future projects like cards and figures on Sandbox are still viable. The only thing that is specifically changing now is that no additional money is being spent on FON development until we come up with a schedule, staffing, and funding plan that makes sense. Sounds like something they should have had from the beginning.
Exactly. It's something they should have had from the beginning. And again, I do not remember specifically who all was actually involved in the actual development team. I do not remember any names being dropped for anything other than actually speaking with the people who were involved in some of the Kaiju Land battle animations and model rigging.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, they weren't able to do a whole lot of rigging for what the money that was being tossed their way was, which was completely underpaying them by a huge amount. And these are people who to do a good rigging of a character model cost anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000 easy. I think they actually charge more than that depending on the model in question, but at the same time, that's kind of what happens here.
Mm-hmm.
And to go forward to call back to the first paragraph here, the audio story, videos and stuff, there was very little audio, other generic stuff, and there was, as far as I know, I have heard nothing about any kind of story videos whatsoever for any of these characters, except maybe several years ago, back when we were still on the forums and going over like that Dragon Lotus thing I was telling you about was like an intro stuff for it. So
yeah, and that was really early on, and nothing had came about it.
Nothing come from that because nothing had been expanded upon that.
Okay.
Even in the arenas and stuff. So.
Okay, so number 2, how did we get to this state? Once the Kickstarter was successful, we put together a development plan that began in March of 2013. Our plan was to develop 2 games, Kaiju Land Battles, KLB, and Fall of Nemesis, FON. KLB was a bare-bones project for early access that we hoped to push out in June of 2014, with Fall of Nemesis to follow in November 2015. Our plan involved about 9 developers and about $100,000 worth of development above our Kickstarter money.
Here's the thing on that. This is also, the Kickstarter was successful. This is the second Kickstarter they tried. The first one failed, did not make its funding aspects here. Now I don't remember, and I'm going to go ahead and check here for Kickstarter on the second funding, because I should be able to search up the Colossal Kaiju Combat and see for myself how much it cost. Because I don't remember I don't remember it being about $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like very, very low on the low bar from what it was. And interesting. I'm not seeing it show up on Kickstarter.
Let's see. Maybe you have to look at it.
There it is.
Okay.
Project ended, successful. Oh, wait, no, this is the Oya Kickstarter. I'm not seeing the original one. Let me see if I can search up my projects. Back projects. Here we go. Fall of Nemesis.
Oh, found it. So
Clash of the Kaijin.
It is $112.
Okay, well, $112,000. Okay, so it did get funded with $112,000. The last update on the Kickstarter specifically was for August of 2014.
Yeah.
And this was done in 2013. Was when the Kickstarter ended. And because okay, so here's the thing. In the on the second Kickstarter, they are showing only 3 people on the development team: Simon Strange, Matt Frank, and Bob Eagleton, which I do not remember Bob doing any work for Kaiju Combat.
Yeah, it's quite a surprise. And it's also strange that he's getting another artist as opposed to someone with actual game developing cred.
Right, so apparently I was wrong. Apparently we did get a little bit over $100,000 for the second Kickstarter, so that was successful. As far as the development, I actually remember Kaiju Land Battle is supposed to be coming out earlier than June 2014. Because I thought we were supposed to be getting that like May 2014. And the thing that you'll notice here, and then probably if you didn't gather already, is that we kept hearing that the development of the games kept getting pushed back. Now, this is good and bad in 2 ways. It's good in that usually if it's being pushed back, usually means that it's still being refined, isn't quite up to snuff, it's still being worked on, still being tweaked. That's not a bad thing if a game's getting pushed back to help fix some of these issues. That's actually a good thing. It helps make the game come out less buggy, less problematic, all of that. In the bad way is that we kept getting stuff pushed back at months at a time, constantly, which again added to the whole disdain we had for the project. So they were expecting Kaiju Land Battles. Kaiju Land Battles came out again, I guess late or early late 2014, like in August, September, when it finally got released. Because we were waiting for it at G-Fest. Was not done. Waited for it again later on in the year. We did not get it till about late fall, early winter of 2014. So it kept getting pushed back consistently. And again, Fall of Nemesis, we had very little to work with. And it says that Fall of Nemesis to follow in November 2015. That's not entirely accurate, because I thought they were going to have at least a pre-build for it by G-Fest of that year, which they kind of did, but it was like about a sixth of the game, and it was still buggy as hell.
Okay. So, let's see. We hit a few snags and had to shuffle some staffing plans around, but KLB went live in August of 2014. We began to iterate on the controls and combat systems and had a very productive 3 months. Then our environment artist, Ron Claiborne, died suddenly and unexpectedly. Ron was a founding member of Pipeworks. He contributed to every game they made up until his death. This understandably upset some of our plans, especially the building destruction system, which was linked to the grappling system. We went through a couple alternate environment artists, but to no avail.
Here's the thing with that. Now, I don't know about, like, if Ron Claiborne was involved with the game or not. If he did pass away, I do not remember his name being mentioned at all in any of the discussion of the game, of the environments, of anything. In any of the discussions the game was going on here, there was very little transparency about who was actually working on the game. No names we could reference, no names we could research, nothing on that instance. There was very little being told to us as the development management team, or the development team. So I do not remember Ron's name being brought up in any sense. I especially do not being brought up at all on the forums when he died. Like, I would expect a big blow like that would have gotten a lot of publicity. No one I've talked to remembers that or recalls that happening at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so Kaiju Battles went live in August. It was actually supposed to go live in May.
Mm-hmm.
So it did go live in August of 2014. And by iterating on the controls, remember I said that they got rid of blocking because people were complaining because people can't play fighting games very well, apparently. So, and again, I don't recall Ron's name being mentioned at all in the shout box, in any of the discussions about the development of the game, his involvement, or even his death. So now, I don't doubt that maybe Ron Claiborne died and was prominent with Pipeworks, but I do not remember his name being involved, mentioned in any of the work with the development of the game at all. So I don't know how true that statement is, but based on Simon's past record, I'm not putting much stock into it, unfortunately. So.
Okay. During this time, we did not spend any extra money. However, the 2 engineers who were scheduled to build the environmental destruction system were unable to begin without an environmental artist, and their window of availability is now over. And without that key feature, our development plan was fully derailed to the point where we needed to announce that we needed to suspend development. Please note, there was no lightning bolt that doomed anything. We didn't run out of development money, nor did anyone refuse to work for us. These problems aren't anything that would have been fixed with more money, or more exposure, or more press. It's just a budget and labor issue that needs to be reworked and rescheduled, but until that happens, there is no scheduled work.
Okay, here's 2 things in that sentence you need to take away from those 2 paragraphs here. One, keep saying we did not spend any extra money, we did not run out of development money, and then says it is just a budget and labor issue. Did anyone else catch that? We did not spend any extra money. We did not run out of development money. It is just a budget and labor issue.
So you did run out of money if it's a budget issue.
Okay, and again, we've had money stolen, and the transparency aspect of how much money was being spent on what stopped about halfway through this development nightmare we call CKC here. So, the other thing that was very interesting about that was there was more than just two engineers for background engineering that was messed up here. Okay, because I know for a fact he has gone through at least 3 different sets of modeling and rigging artists and video game actual developers for this. I'm actually friends with 2 of them. The first one ran off with money from what we've been able to determine on this.
Uh-huh.
The other 2 cost too much, and would have cost them most of the money to just get the basic rigging for the models done. He's gone through more personnel on this project than he's willing to admit. And he's saying that there's no lightning bolt. This thing was pretty much doomed from the get-go.
Right. It was not so much a lightning bolt, but rather an entire storm.
Right. There was a big storm that happened to go through all of this here. So, and he's right that these problems are anything that would have been fixed with more. Well, the thing is, more money would help. That's the flat out thing.
You could have gotten the people who you were too cheap to get in the first place.
Right, and then they refuse to work with you, but then they come back and basically troll you back saying, oh, by the way, we actually can animate this better. I've done this on my own free time in this last bit. But we really can't. You can't afford to pay us, so we really can't do anything for you. Sorry. The other thing that I'm looking at here, more money would have been paid to get actual people to work on the game and get it developed.
Right, you could have had
more exposure would have helped. More exposure and press would have helped in a very, very short term because of how this game was getting blasted on 4chan.
Really?
For crying out loud. Yes. It was getting blasted on 4chan. Several of the characters were getting blasted on 4chan. And it was one of the things where people were trying to back this. Tokyo Kingdoms, which I don't know about Tokyo Kingdoms because it's been a while since I've been on any
Toho
Kingdom message board.
Or
Toho Kingdom, yeah.
Toho Kingdom, okay.
They lambast the entire project because of this entire debacle. There have been like several pages of people trying to defend it, and just basically they're lambasting it.
I'm pretty sure there are going to be people who are going to try to defend this going to defend this game in the comments of this video.
Right. So basically, and the other comment that brings this up here is like we didn't run out of developmental money and we're not spending any extra money. I'm sorry, the card game you're running has less money coming back from it that's going into it. That's been another major issue as well. Is that
so they're bleeding money through the cards?
Right, money's bleeding through the card sets because no one's buying them, as well as they're making the people who win like the spots pay for an entire set of cards to help cover costs, which is one of the most underhanded things I think I've done. Because some of the other people in the chat out in the group message I was in with. These are kids. These are like 15, 14-year-olds. They don't have money for this.
No.
I sure as hell don't have the money for it, because I don't want to waste my money on shit I don't want.
Yeah, yeah.
I waste my money on stuff I want, then don't use. There's a difference. So the card game, and Simon stated on several occasions that the card game is self-sufficient, which I don't buy at all. Because I'm fairly certain, I don't have the numbers to back this up, unfortunately, but based on what I've seen, there are very few people buying and playing the card game.
Also, this is another comparison to what happened with Mighty Number 9, where Keiji Inafune, he wanted to like franchise out Mighty Number 9, and before the first game was even out, when really you should make the game first, and then people, if the game is good, people will want to have the merchandise that's soon to follow. Here, right. Simon did the same thing where he's like, we're gonna make little figurines, we're gonna sell card games, I said okay, I made an okay on the comic book, but
didn't endorse the comic book, even though you can still buy the comic book on comics.
But he's still totally okay with the cards and the figurines, and even though it's like, no one's really gonna want this stuff if like the thing that it's based off of is not finished.
I will say this though about the figurines, they're actually really good quality. I don't have any of the characters I want. They don't have any of the characters I want to buy.
Do they have just like the original like 8 characters that were first revealed?
Yeah, they have the fall of Nemesis characters. I kind of really wanted a Nemesis and a Dragon Lord. This is what I really wanted, but they sold out, and I really don't want to dish out the money to Simon because I don't want Simon to get any more of my money.
So yeah, the rest of the information to follow is like just basically it's like we're still going to keep the forums up, and it's like the sandbox, we're still going to be selling cards and figurines. We're not going to have any more people, any more sponsored because the game's not being developed. And other than that, it's like I will still be around to discuss things and hang out with people. So some of my new work takes place in an environment with no access to the internet, so I can't be online as frequently as I've been in the past, but I'm certainly not going anywhere, even though he's pretty much kind of gone AWOL since May. He came back once in like August, I believe, just to talk about some personal issues that he's had and that he's been away from the internet, and he takes responsibility for not sending this message to Steam and Kickstarter, even though he still hasn't done that.
He had some personal issues to deal with, and that's fine. I mean, real life happens and it sucks.
Yeah.
But I think over everything, what Simon's attempted to do here, and I think this kind of reflects on the fact that they did not have a booth for CKC at
G-Fest this year. Yeah, he was absent.
he and the entire thing about Kaiju Combat was gone, and I think it has to go. It's not coming back yet because there's no money coming into it.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much of this the ball on this has been dropped so much, so badly, that we were promised so much, and we were promised the world, and we were failed to deliver on even a block of property, So it's very disheartening on this, and it is a message to learn about getting your hopes up for something that is not feasible, because again, there's so many legalities with what they wanted to do, especially with getting the Gamera series, the Godzilla series, the Ultraman series is one series they were going to try and get here.
I mean, heck, it wasn't even until recently that Ultraman started gaining some momentum in America with the manga and the Crunchyroll stuff.
Right, so there was just a bunch of stuff they were trying to do, and it kind of failed for them. It kind of hit a wall, because through a combination of Simon mismanaging the funds, not being very transparent with us, and then stopping all transparency with it, and almost kind of feels like he was riding on the coattails of Matt's success in the comic industry. Which, of course, by this point, Matt's availability has just basically dropped because of all the work he's doing for IDW, for the work he was doing for Jeremy Robinson, for all his other work he's doing, for all his other projects he's working on. So his availability has dropped right off the bloody map. So he's so busy right now. I'm not really surprised that he's hard to get for this year. But I also don't think that there's really anyone else that could replace this, because I don't think anyone's going to want to get involved with this.
Yeah, there's now a stigma attached to Kaiju Combat.
I mean, like I said, Simon even came to me to try and get stuff for the art for the Evolution cards, which I thought was kind of weird that he came to me when I kind of haven't had much contact with him. He didn't contact me about any stuff that I had offered to do for him. And in the beginning, I did offer to do quite a bit, and he kind of turned us down on that offer because, again, we were free research and development, debugging, all of this stuff. When actually we should be getting paid a whole crap ton more for this. But I get word from him saying that he wants me to do some Evo cards for him, and I turn him down. Because it's not worth the money for the time I have to get it done. So there was that, and I still kind of think that was a little bit of an insult for $50 per card. I'm like, it's not worth my time. It's not worth my. I'm worth more than that. Not to sound like I'm an ungrateful asshole for getting an offer of work, but know the value of your work. If any artists out there, know the value of your work.
So, I guess there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. The behind-the-scenes tale of a project with so much ambition, but pretty much fell flat on its face when it first, before it could even cross the starting line. I do want to say thank you very much, Denny, for just giving us your a lot of this information. I'm very happy that we had this opportunity to discuss Kaiju Combat in full in this gigantic 2-hour plus chat, and that I hope 2 hour
supersized extra extended cut.
Extra extended cut special edition of Kaiju's Corner, and I hope anyone who had any lingering questions about what occurred with Kaiju Combat and why it fell off the face of the earth, you have a much clearer idea as to what happened to the game and its progress. So,
if I could add one more thing here, if you want to, I would try reaching out to some other members on the forums if you want another view of what happened on that issue. Because again, I will iterate for everyone out there listening here who's stuck around to the end of this massive diatribe of me rambling on about stuff. This is my experience with the game development, with the forums, with the people on the forums, as well as with Simon personally. On a one-on-one level. So again, this is kind of colored by my bias and what I've seen and what I've seen. There's several things that are rumors, are not verified, and those I will admit that those are in some of this a little bit here. So do bear in mind that there are some rumors, some other stuff going on, but a lot of this has been my experience and what I've taken away from this experience. So I do want to verify that.
Okay.
And there are at least a dozen other people who did work in the project and had worked with Simon and had a similar experience with me. On that front. And some of them had a slightly different experience, and some of them had a slightly better experience. And some of them, and there are others that still blindly follow Simon, no matter what.
Right.
Which is very disheartening because it kind of proves that no matter what happens, and no matter how bad someone is, or how bad someone acts, or how bad someone obviously should have lost your trust, that there are people who will still trust them unconditionally. And it's kind of a shame in that end. But again, my experience, what I've taken away from this, and how I feel about the entire project as a whole, is surely and only my stance on this and my experience in this entire 3-year-long debacle. So yeah.
Okay. And if anyone does have any other recollection, and if anyone has their own recollections on their participation with Kaiju Combat, please let us know in the comments below. Let us know what you think about, what you heard tonight or today or whenever you are listening to this video. And I would really be interested in hearing like anyone who, even like YouTube or on YouTube or outside of YouTube, who have had this sort of experience, or they just want to say something, to please, respond to us and let us know what you think about Kaiju Combat in general. So to wrap things up, where can people find you, Denny?
You can check out my DeviantArt page at DR Studios, or it's dr-studios.deviantart.com. That's my primary website for all my art. I do have a Tumblr on that stuff, but all that stuff's linked through from my DeviantArt stuff, as well as the Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, social media stuff. If you guys want to check out, all that other fun, wonderful stuff. I do have a couple other projects in the works I've been working on here for a while, so those are also linked on a bunch of those other sites here too. So I'm not going to bog you down with a whole bunch of links here. But yeah. That's pretty much it.
All right, and definitely check out his new webcomic, Martial Star, and expect to hear my thoughts about it on this YouTube channel in the hopefully near future. And be sure to check out Denny Roth, who will be on this channel again in a full-blown interview with both him and Martial Star's writer Declan. Outside that, be sure I will most definitely have the links to all of your websites, Denny, on this video's description below.
Sounds good.
So then, as usual, I have been Andres Perez, aka KaijuNoir.
And I'm Denny Roth, also known as Draco Raylin, or just DR. And it's your show. Take it away.
Until next time, everybody. Take care. And please, watch your money when it comes to Kickstarter and other crowdfunded projects. See you next time, guys.